Hey everyone, this is Jack from the Cardboard Held, and today we are getting a little bit dicey by taking a look at Brew, the new joint by Steve-O Torres and Pandasaurus Games. But in order for us to talk about what's great and what's not so great about this game, it's always important to have some context, so let's talk about what is this game. Brew is a game of dice, tusked weasels, and area control trickery. Each round, players start by rolling their dice and take turns assigning those dice to matching spaces in the village or the round's forest spaces to forage for resources necessary to brew potions or recruit fantastical beasts with ongoing powers. Most of the dice you assign are affiliated with your player color, but each player has 2 elemental dice per round that have special powers when assigned but are neutral in ownership once in play, which is important because Brew, in spite of its dicey worker placement cuteness, is a cold-blooded area control game. At the end of each round, every forest card is checked for control. The player with the most of their color dice on it gets control, claiming its fat points, and as an added bonus, if your creatures match up with your forest types, the creatures are worth more at the end of the game. If it were just placing dice, this would be pretty dull, but once per turn, in addition to playing dice, players can brew one aforementioned potion on display and/or drink one potion they've brewed, which interact, impede, or otherwise manipulate placed and unplaced dice, creating a load of potential tomfoolery. After a scant 4 rounds, where each round has the town swapping sides from the day and night cycle, players count up points from forests they control, sweet antelope frogs and other creatures they've recruited, point tokens acquired from said antelope frogs and other creatures, and potions they brewed whether used or unused throughout the game, and most points wins. Now, when reviewing a game, I don't typically kick it off with talking about aesthetics because, while important, aesthetics don't a great game make. But in this game, it is so inviting and beautiful and lush at the table that I have to talk about that as my own entry point, because I picked this up at my local game store without knowing much about the game, but just looking at the font, the text, the weird little fox deer on the front, I knew that it was a game that I wanted to explore. The dice are these beautifully engraved dice with all these strange pastel colors that you don't typically see in a game, and the character designs are gorgeous, from the animals to the characters that you play as, which are like little synecdoches for the game itself. Strange, cute, and oddly compelling. This is a game that just looks vibrant and interesting and makes you want to play. And that would be a problem if it didn't actually deliver with the goods when it came to gameplay. Which brings me to the thing that I liked most about the game. The thing that surprised me the most is that for it being this Euro-y, inviting worker placement dice game, I didn't anticipate so much cutthroat area control and so many tools, resources that you have at your disposal to really manipulate the area control in the game. And when I actually got that, I worried that it was going to be too mean for the group that I was playing this with, players who typically like friendlier Euro-style games, and nonetheless, they had a blast, a great time. Part of that may be the aesthetic that feels inviting, encouraging, and friendly and fun, and part of that may be that it's not particularly confrontational. It's just that you can get up to all kinds of trickery by swapping dice or moving dice or even incinerating spaces that are vacant on a particular forest in order to say, hey, no one else can go here. I will burn the rest of the forest down to make sure that I get control of it, which is silly and fun, but also kind of sinister and cutthroat. And one thing that I particularly like, that I noticed as I played this game a few times, is that the restriction to only brew 1 potion and only drink 1 potion on any given turn is incredibly important, because it makes any coup that you make feel earned and like it didn't come out of nowhere, which I think preserves suspense, but also makes the sort of tomfoolery that you can get up to a little bit anticipated and in some ways inevitable. And then The other thing that I really love that this game nails is that it feels focused, even Spartan. It's not a particularly broad game. Everything that is in play weaves with one another. The dice you place are going to get you resources or animals that are going to make you more efficient at getting those resources, and those resources get you potions, which can be spent in order to clean the forests, which will then make the animals that you've recruited that much more valuable and trigger many of their powers. All of it weaves together spectacularly without feeling like there's a lot of chaff. In some ways, this is going to make the game feel relatively limited, like you don't have a lot of strategic options in how you approach the game. But for the scope of the game, instead of feeling narrow, to me, it felt focused. Though that does bring me to some of the criticisms of the game. I mean, this game is loaded with tactical decisions. You know, those decisions with immediate ramifications where you're going to pivot into the next and next and next, but there's not really a sense of long-term strategy in this game. And you would think that with player powers and all these animals with ongoing powers that you are going to be able to recruit, that you would be able to cultivate some sort of strategy, but because it's only 4 rounds, you don't really get to see the fulfillment of that strategic promise. And that also brings me to the character powers themselves. While they feel potent on paper, they're very situational. I don't think I've seen anyone play an entire game without utilizing their power once, but rarely does it get utilized to the frequency that you would expect to cultivate your own unique experience playing this particular character. And of course, while I did mention that my group doesn't typically like heavy conflict games and still enjoyed this game, it is meaner than you're going to expect going into it, and you have to have a degree of backbone in order to accept that you may spend your round trying to focus on getting a particular forest, and someone could just come in there and be like, no, I'm going to make sure that one's mine, or at the very least, no one gets it. If you like really lighthearted, low conflict games, and that sounds like a bad time, well, it might actually be a bad time. And so that's it, the highs, the lows of Brew, a game that I picked up at the store, looking at the front and back and expecting that I was going to like it, got it home, and it turned out to be a different game than I really expected, and liked it even more. And that is our review. But I want to hear from you. What are some of the games that have defied your expectations and surprised you, or had an element to it that was a much more potent version of an element that you don't typically see in that genre of game? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, thanks for being such an amazing community. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald.